Hello and welcome to Bastionland Broadcasting. Tonight we are looking at an RPG that's got me very excited. I've been wanting to do more RPG read-throughs. So if there are particular RPGs that you think it would be interesting to do a read-through, the only obstacle is that I always try and get the go-ahead from the person that made the RPG, and there's some people I really want to get the go-ahead from, and I'm still waiting to hear back from them. So there are some in the pipeline. But I would like to do more of these kind of read-throughs because I think it's always kind of interesting to look through. And this one in particular is very interesting. So this is a game called Skorne, which is by Sam Dobler. Now, full transparency, if you go all the way to the end, there is a mention for Into the Odd. And there are certain things in this document that look kind of very clearly Into the Odd inspired. I'm trying to not just become I made a joke with someone recently that I only like games now that are inspired by Into the Odd and inspired by Electric Bastion. But I'm trying to be a little bit more open-minded than just enjoying the games that that have sort of taken influence from some of my things. But this is a really interesting game. It's not an Into the Odd hack, but there's a few little bits and pieces in there that might look familiar. So Skorne is a game by Sam Dobler, who you might know from the blog Dreaming Dragon Slayer, and he's kindly come onto the podcast to talk to me. I think it's either going to be next week's episode or the week after, I'm not sure, but the episode with him will be coming up, and we talk a little bit about Skorne on there. But there's enough cool stuff that I wanted to do a little bit of a read through as well. So Skorne, what is it? The reason this got me so excited is there was a version, I think last year, maybe even 2020, that Sam released, and it seemed it felt like he kind of made this thing, drop kicked it out there, and then kind of moved on to doing other things. But I know that he's sort of come back to it recently, and we'll talk a little bit about the inspirations when we get to the end, because it does draw a few things from other places, but it does some really interesting things that I think are kind of unique to this game as well. And it kind of represents a movement that I'm really, really interested in and really excited by, which is that kind of FKR style of game. It feels like it's one of the few games that I feel really kind of grips onto that style for me. So, it's only a short book. It's 28 pages. There's a few pieces of artwork, I think, but mostly just 28 pages text. It's very cheap. I mean, I kind of want to say just go and check it out. It's available on itch.io now, and it's I think it's like $3 or something like that. And for $3, what can you buy for $3 other than this? So, first of all, it does a really good job of presenting its setting without having an opening paragraph about the setting. It tells you about the setting by telling you about the game. And there are some bits and pieces later on that are more explicit, but it kind of encourages, it kind of just gives you the setting as you learn about the game. So, one player is Skorne, the Devil Prince, commander of demon rulers and their armies. The other players are renegades, part of mankind's insurrection against the darkness that reigns. Overthrow the evil tyrants, free chained captives, fight to the last man. To play, bring these rules, scratch paper, writing instruments, and at least 2 6-sided dice. These rules will be marked up during play, if not outright destroyed. And then I don't think you're legally allowed to put a game up on itch.io unless there's some silly rule that no one's going to use. So bring along a source of fire and a brazier. Use them to dispose of discarded notes and rules and the sheets of dead renegades. I will happily be proven wrong. I'm sure there's going to be videos flying around of people burning their character sheets. And even if this isn't something that I would necessarily say you need to do, I think having it there as a rule sets the tone. So you've got strength, dexterity, willpower, like I say. Maybe some little bits and pieces that I'm not claiming to have invented, strength. But, there's a little bit of into the odd there, maybe. Rolls are kind of... It's like a 2d6 system, so it's like 2d6 plus your ability modifier, and then the GM does the same, and whoever rolls highest wins. And that's kind of the entire, rolling system. And this is where I think it gets into the sort of FKR style of game, because I've heard a number of people talking about using this kind of system for FKR games, where it is literally just like an opposed roll between the players and the GM, and whoever wins wins. And you might have some small modifiers, but that's kind of it. And that's kind of the way that this goes. I've been corrected in chat that this game is actually name your own price on itch, but give him the $3. Come on, let him buy a coffee. And then, so that's the rolls, and then the interesting bit is when you get to section 3, which is violence. So it took me a few reads through this to understand it. And the one thing I will say is this game does a very good job of explaining its unusual concepts really well, which I'll get onto as we get through it. All actions are taken simultaneously. Damage is dealt in hits: 1 hit for a simple weapon, 2 for a martial weapon, 3 for devastating weapons, 4 for deadly weapons. Damage is instant, no roll required. So that's kind of the thing that grabbed my attention, because I've harped on and on and on over the years about removing attack rolls and just going straight to damage. And now this is going a step further. It's just go straight to damage, and there's no roll for damage. So, good positions and clever tactics increase damage dealt. And renegades have hits equal to 6 plus their strength. Armor gives you more hits. So your typical character is going to have between 6 and maybe 6 to 8 hits. I guess they could have less, actually, sorry. So they could have between 5, 6, 7, 8 kind of hits. So what that means is if your character... Oh, and let me finish this section first. When you get to 0 hits, you're incapacitated. If you go into negative, you're dead. And when they die, do not linger, but instead call forth a new determined soul. You recover 1 hit for resting and a meal. And that's kind of it. And then there's a bulky rule that looks very nice. And time and fate makes fools of us all, obviously. So the key sort of thing here is attacks happen simultaneously, and they always cause the same amount of damage. So if you have a sword that does 2 damage, and your opponent is a big wolf that does 3 damage, then if you stand next to that wolf and say, I'm going to hit the wolf with my sword, and the wolf's going to bite you, you're going to do 2 damage, and the wolf is going to do 3 damage to you. And it's going to happen simultaneously. So obviously, you can kind of look at this and think, well, I know how this is going to go. So we'll get to this when we get to the enemy design. But it's interesting no matter which way you cut it, because if you outclass the enemy, then you might just decide, oh, fuck it, we're going to take the easy way. I'm just going to go and hit him, and yeah, he's going to hit me, but I'll out damage him, and we're going to kill this guy because I know that we can. Or the other side is that if you are outclassed by your opponent and they have the upper hand and they will just beat you in a straight fight, then you have to get creative. And yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff to unpack about that, which we'll get to a little bit further in. There are magic rules as well. So magic is corruption. Any soul may wield fire as their power. Using a power is an uncertain action, so you're going to need to roll for it. Instead of rolling 2d6, the player rolls as many d6s as they dare and adds willpower. So you could just roll 1. You could decide to roll 5. But every die that shows a 6 is a disaster. And if 2 or more die show 6, then one of the 7 seals is broken. Roll on the broken seal table, and when the 7th seal is broken, the world is ruined and the game ends. Tear the rules into 7 pieces and burn them. So that's the magic system. And it's kind of not really I will come back through all this, but I really like that. That's kind of it for the magic system. There is a table for like disasters, I think. Is there? Am I making this up? There's a broken seal table. But every die that shows a 6 is a disaster, and I think that's down to you to just work out what that means. So here is one of the things that I really like about this. I like it so much I'm going to treat myself to a drink of water while I enjoy it. So, an example of play. And even says, this is an example of a session underway. It has no direct bearing on your game. Which is I'd like to ask him why that's there, because it feels like you've got a very authoritative, doomy voice. And then here it's like, oh no, it's fine. If you don't want to do it this way, that's fine. Which I just think is kind of funny. But I kind of understand why it's there, because you want people to feel they can run the game their own way. But it just made me chuckle. So this example of play is really good. Just setting the kind of... It kind of explains the rules that we've just seen in some context, and it also gives you gives you the tone of the game and gives you a little bit of sort of example of like the kind of content you're going to be coming up with. There's a little bit of magic use in there, the power of fire. And yeah, and it's got them fighting a demon that is clearly going to beat them in a straight fight, so they have to be clever and beat the demon another way. Now, character creation. Oh, and we do have an example of the kind of the disaster thing as well. So, creation. In the beginning, give your renegade a name, though it will not save them. Names have power, older names have even more power. So it's this kind of stuff and it's so tricky to do, because there's been games that do things like this, where it's written in kind of it's written in the tone of the game. And there's times when they do this, and my head will just be saying like, oh, shut up, just give me the rules, just tell me the rules in like the plainest way possible, because that's what I want. But I think when you've got a game that is short as this, and has so few rules as this, and has these really good examples of play, you can get away with doing these slightly more characterful bits of writing. It's when you've got a system that's already slightly confusing, and then you try and put all this flavour on top of it, that the system becomes even more confusing. Roll 2d6 for your ability scores. If you got 2, you subtract... Honestly, like, this is testament to how much I like this game that I'm forgiving this, because this paragraph stresses me out. But it makes sense once you understand it. So if you've got 2 or 3, that means your bonus is -2. If you've got 4 or 5 in that score, then you've got -1. 6 to 8 is a 0, and so on. But it did take me several reads to get that, but it's it does all kind of add to the feel. You get some money, and the really interesting thing is coming next. So you roll all this, and then you get your starter package, which is based off this table. But it's not the same doesn't work the same as the into the odd table. Instead, what you do is you add up all your ability scores. So let's say, well, you know what? Should we roll a character right now? Let's do it. So my character has a strength of 7, a dexterity of 3, and a willpower of 9. So what that translates to, because it's just the modifiers that matter really. So dexterity 3, did I say? Is a -2. So I've got -2 to dexterity. I've got 0 strength, -2 dexterity, and +1 in willpower. So that gives me a total of -1. And then I roll a d6 and I get a 5, which means I go to this table. I'm in the -1 section. I rolled a 5. So my character has Power Thunder. And that's all you get, Power Thunder. It doesn't tell me anything about what that means. It's down to me to work that out. Long Spear, Full Armor, Manacles, and Soothing Herbs. But here's the thing. If another player in the group rolled a character and got that result, they would move to the left. So they would get this power here, this glass one. And after that, they would move to the row above. And when these characters die, you cross them off. And then when you... Let me make sure I've got this right. Yeah, if you can't get a viable character from your roll, then humanity is lost and the game ends. Burn the rules and the world is consumed. So every time you cross off a character on here, every time you make a character, you're crossing off a box on here, and eventually this is signifying like the end of the world. So the more things get crossed off, the more likely it is that the end of the world is going to get triggered. And that combined with that 7th seal thing. I can see Sam is in the chat already like correcting me for missing the first rule of character creation. I read the first rule. Give them a name. So yeah, I like this kind of like death clock thing that's going on, because you've got it here, you've got it with the 7th seal. It gives the world a ticking clock, and I like that a lot. The real horror of this game is the resolution of this image. So I would advise Sam to do a Kickstarter and fund some high resolution art. But until now, we'll look past that. The rest of this book is for Skorne's eyes. Renegades beware. The tables on the following pages have 36 results. Yeah, and we know how to roll a d66. Bold entries are found on other tables. So this is our broken seal table that we had whenever you roll 2 or more disasters when you're using the sort of magical powers. And then we've got we're straight into how to prep the game. Again, there's no at the start of the book, we didn't get a paragraph saying, "It is the world of Gathramar and the demon lord Skorne rises again." No, we do learn about the devil prince Skorne, but we don't have to read some bad fiction to get to it. It's just there in the game. And it's the same here. The preparation, it starts by telling you what you need to do to play the game and how to run the game. And in doing that, we learn about things like these tyrants, which are like the bosses, the sort of bosses of this world, and their domains, the situations, the injustice. So let's do it. So start the game with the renegades in a tyrant's domain in a situation. Have them witness an injustice or have one happen to them. Make a tyrant directly or indirectly responsible, then tell them where that tyrant makes their domain. Establish the threats and obstacles that stand in the renegade's way. Present rewards with a cost in a high-risk situation. Present opportunities to increase the capabilities of the renegades. All good, solid advice that's nice to just have condensed into one place. Every prepared encounter of monsters, people, tyrants, or anything else should be high impact and give the renegades a scar, transformation, or power. Each moment of the game should reveal the flavour of the world and give it life. Lovely advice. And you've got a little bit of that kind of foreground growth thing that I've always been rabbiting on about. While you may start with a prepared situation, do not prepare a plot or story. Good. After presenting the renegades with a situation, ask them to make a choice. Always say the impact of their choices. So yeah, information, choice, impact. After the first session, prepare more tyrants, expanding the roster of powerful enemies. If you want a short campaign, simply start the game with some Renegade packages already used, a few seals already broken, and fewer Tyrants. Yeah, I like that idea, because you're right. If I knew I was running this for a one-shot, when I was reading through this earlier today again, a little thing that came to mind was like, well, if I'm running this for a one-shot, would the players just think, we don't care about the 7 seals, we'll break 6 of them, and then we'll be careful because we're not going to be here next week. Whereas if I was running this as a one-shot, you maybe start it with like 5 seals broken or something, like just to like really to let them still have that sort of doomed feeling. So let's do it. Let's get a starting situation for our character. So, 61. The domain. We are in the tallest tower. Part of the reason that I like this as well is I've been playing Doom Eternal. I'm late to the party on it, I know, but it's just got like some ridiculous imagery that I think would work really well here. What is the situation in this tallest tower? 65. Warfare. So we are literally like trapped in the middle of like a war that's happening at the top of, well, it says the tallest tower, but let's say it's a war that's happening between these towers, and they're all like connected by these chains, and there's like demon soldiers like scrabbling over the chains to get between one tower and the next. And we almost don't need the injustice. We're jumping ahead of ourselves. The injustice that we've seen is lust. Well, this isn't a PG stream, because I know I've already sworn, but you can work that one out for yourself. So we've got some principles. I do like it when games have these kind of principles. I know it's kind of like Apocalypse World is the one that gets a lot of credit for it, but I always love to see it. I would love to see it in use. Be tough but fair. Yeah, when the Renegades achieve a win, let them have it, but never ever pull your punches. And I think that's especially true in this game, because you're not using the dice as much, because you're not using it for things like just straight up attacks. I think you need to let them live or die by their decisions, because the decisions matter all the more. I've talked about this game before, but it doesn't quite map over onto tabletop RPGs. But it reminds me, in the way that combat system works, reminds me of Into the Breach, which is a very kind of tactical chess-like kind of turn-based strategy game on PC and other systems. But it's in that there's no like randomness. You know what your attack is going to do, and the randomness comes from what are the enemy going to do. But even then, you get like some warnings, so you know which enemy is attacking where, and it's up to you to use your team in the most effective way and kind of be clever about it. And it reminds me of that, which is something that I've really wanted to kind of like tap into for some of my own games. Give information. You've heard me talk about that enough by now. Treat the world like a real place. Yeah, so everything from locations to people to organizations run on consistent logic. And that's something I hear about a lot in the kind of FKR play world not rules thing. Like really going in on the sort of internal logic of a setting rather than relying on the rules of the system to keep things feeling real. If you can make the world feel real by having its rules, its internal rules be sort of quite clearly laid out. Yeah, have the world react while also setting its own plans in motion. Let the dice fall. Reward victory. Evil is real. Demons, including Skorne, are all minions. Including Skorne and all minions are irredeemable manifestations of malevolence. They may be inclined to turn on each other. They are certainly a petty and spiteful bunch. Any character that sides with Skorne is lost and a traitor. And there's been a lot of discussions about like how to use. We're not going to go into it on this stream, but like the nature of like evil in games like D&D and whether it's right that monsters can be like irredeemably evil. Making them demons is a nice cut and dry way of being like, no, these are literally like demons from hell. They are like manifestations of everything that's evil. I think that works well. I think when you get into the weird middle ground of like, well, this type of creature, they're evil, but they're still like a real either humanoid or a real they're like a person or an animal. So, you know, evil is, and then when you get into that discussion, it becomes very difficult to get everyone on the same page. I think going for this more supernatural evil is a really good way of handling that at the table. Play safe, and then we get a bit more on the violence system. So this is I wanted to write like a blog post on this, and then there was kind of I realized that Sam had already kind of done it. I mean, that won't stop me. I might still just do the blog post and not credit Sam with all the ideas. But I love this thing about how most monsters are either going to be dangerous but dumb, or weak but cunning. Basically, what I want to do is I want to do like a big list, and in my head it's a D100. Well, it's 2 D100 lists, which is ridiculous, and I don't think I'll be able to do it. Of like, this creature is X but Y, so they have like a strength and a weakness, and I think starting with that can create some really interesting monsters. I don't think I can come up with 100 interesting strengths and weaknesses, so it might end up being like a D12 table, but we'll see how it goes. And there are some examples in here, and it's really good stuff. So again, the renegades realize in general they're going to be either outnumbered, or they're going to be outpowered, or it's just going to be a dangerous situation. So you can't win in a you can't win in a head-on fight most of the time. So immediately they're having to think and come up with good plans. And this is something that you see a lot in OSR-style games, where the players are often less powerful than the monsters in the dungeon or in the adventure. But players still don't always grasp that, and they sometimes try and fight it head-on. So in this game, it's so transparent. If I say to you, this demon that you're fighting will do 4 damage per turn, and it's going to take 12 hits to kill it, then you look at your character with like a sword that does 2 damage and 6 hits before you die. You're going to be, well, let's not fight this thing. It just immediately makes it super clear. So yeah, what can you do? How can we increase our damage? How can we increase our defenses? How can we decrease the enemy's damage? Can we use a maneuver? Should we use our fire magic? Are there any other advantages? Can we call in favors? Are we over our heads? Should we just get out of here? And then you've got scars, transformations, powers, which are all very nice. So your character might end up with 13. You might end up with a broken arm. They might get transformed to have forceful jaws. And the powers are like, this is the spell list essentially. So you might gain the power of corrosion. And then here we have our guide for building the enemies. So yeah, the idea of coming up against something with like 30 hits is you're not going to just fight it. You're going to have to do something clever. And you can give power scars and transformations. You can roll one here for your enemy. We've got some good examples. Very simple, like 3 bullet point things with then a bit more kind of flavor. And there seems to be a real focus on the 2 things it seems to really focus in on, which I like, are this like X but Y thing. So the soldier of toil. Well, this seems to just be bad actually. So yeah, this soldier is just shitty. But you might get like the muted firebird, who is tough and masterful, but they're also feeble. And these are little bits of flavour, but also there's a lot of things that just have little rules. So the Eternal Wolf can only be impaired or imprisoned. Its hunt can never end, but only be redirected. So it's just outright saying it's like immortal. And that is immediately really fun. The Devil Boar, an impaled victim will begin to change into a shadow, stopped only by ingesting the boar's horn in powdered form. Oh, and we've even got a glory kill here, so I think Sam's been playing Doom as well. And then our Tyrants. So these are our sort of big bosses of the world. And yeah, the Tyrants give shape to the campaign, and I like that it's quite explicit of like, the goal of this campaign is to kill these Tyrants. And if I were running it again, I would be quite explicit and say there are like 7 Tyrants, and when you've killed all of them, you've succeeded. And yeah, so at least 4. So the concept gives you the basic idea. The aspect is like a modifier. And also like potentially a title. And then they have an asset. And again, one of the things I like here, which kind of reminds me of what I like about sort of Spark tables, is it doesn't need to be literal. You can take it. So if we have someone is the crow, they don't need to literally be a crow. Like, it might be cool if they are, but it could be like that their nickname is Crow, and why would they have that nickname? So let's have a look. 36. So the concept is a giant, and that aspect is 62, a treasurer. So treasurer, we could take that literally as like they're like the wealth keeper of this organization, this collection of tyrants that work under Skorne. So they're like a big Titanic like banker. But one thing I prefer, when I saw treasurer, there's like a type of crab that you get in the ocean that's called a Decorator Crab, and they grab bits of coral and other bits of shell and just bits of like plants, and they stick it to their body. So they spit some kind of glue on it or whatever, and they stick it to their shell, so they're just like covered in stuff, and it's kind of like a type of camouflage. I kind of like them being like covered in treasure, like literally, like they're just a big kind of crab giant guy, and he's like literally like covered in like gold and gems and like sword sticking out of him. That's kind of funny to me somehow. But we didn't run on the asset, so this might change everything. 23, elite soldier. So yeah, so he's paying these mercenaries. He's like the mercenary, what's it called? Like the pay chest. He's like a living pay chest. He's just got all this stuff stuck to him, and he'll like throw down like heaps of gold to keep his mercenary army like going. Trasharama says about very Dark Souls feel. I know Dark Souls is another influence, and we're kind of swamped in like Dark Souls influenced games right now. But this is one of the ones that stands out to me as like it's sort of, this sort of ticks more of the Dark Souls notes than I have seen in lots of other games that are kind of claiming that Dark Souls influence. I think even just the combat alone, the way that damage works, it encourages. It's so much of it is about coming up with a good plan, which I'm not going to go on the whole Dark Souls rant because I've done this once today in a Discord server. But I think if you're going to try and have the player skill element of Dark Souls, you don't have to do that through like literal like, well, I use the roll ability and then I get the backstab and things that you would be doing in the video game. I think instead just embrace the player skill element of RPGs that's already there, which is coming up with a good plan, critical thinking, creative like tactics, and overcoming stronger opponents. And this game really focuses in on that. So we've got some sample tyrants. The Ice Devil is always a nice thing to see. One of my S tier monsters for sure. Did he? Yeah, I think the Ice Devil was in my S tier when I did my ranking. I love these moves. I love anything like this where when you're running this, it just makes you want to run this monster, because I feel like this is like your menu, and you haven't got to worry about lots of numbers or figures or anything like that. Instead, you just have to think, oh, which of these cool things do I want it to do? And like, yeah, it's going to smash the ice out from beneath someone's feet, or it's going to like cover itself in frozen armor, like, and it just does it. We don't need to overthink it. So these are cool. I like that they've got like environment kind of things built into it. It's very cool. Oh, rewards. So what reward would we have gotten for overthrowing the giant treasurer? Oh, a crown, which was given to a tyrant. So we get like the treasurer's crown. And then we might think, well, okay, if we've got the treasurer's crown, that should surely carry some kind of power, you would think. So the power we get is tar. So maybe it was like the tar that it was using to stick things to itself. So maybe we can like access that power now. But maybe it transforms us. So 34. But we are poisonous. We now excrete poison. So there's not tons of tables in this book. It's not like Maze Rats where there's like 50 tables. But the ones that are there are like so useful. And then finally, we have a little thing about making dungeons on a 3x3 grid. It's such a weird coincidence because I've been working away on something that I don't think is necessarily going to be, well, I don't know what's going to happen, but I've got like a project that's kind of in its very, very early stages, like so many of them. And I had a whole thing about using like 3x3 grids because everybody knows how to do like the noughts and crosses tic-tac-toe grid. So I thought, well, let's put that in there because people know how to do it, and it can be a useful little tool to have. And then I saw that we had this, so it's a weird coincidence that this came out. This sort of re-emerged into my life just as I was using it for something else. And yeah, you can use this as kind of a structure and a nice little checklist of things to use. I wonder if this is from. There's a really good checklist. There's a dungeon checklist that Arnold K did at Goblin Punch blog, goblinpunch.blogspot.com, I think, and he had like a dungeon checklist, and this seems like a nicely refined version of that. And then that's it. We've got our list of influences. I mean, as you might expect, Dark Souls. I couldn't get into Darkest Dungeon. I did try, but it felt very grindy to me. It felt in some ways like the opposite of what this game looks like. Whereas this game is like, there's no grind, it's just straight to it. Morkborg, obviously, the influence there is pretty strong. Maze Rats, everyone I talk to, and anybody that I talk to about games, either tells me that they're influenced by Maze Rats or Knave. So Ben Milton is doing something right. And there's a little game called Any Planet is Earth, which we might talk about in a minute. Into the Odd, sounds cool. And then you've got your various other touchstones. So that is Skorne, which you can grab on itch.io. I will put the link. If you're watching this live, you are out of luck unless some kind soul will put the link in the chat, because I am, as always, the one thing I never think to prepare ahead of these streams is to get the link ready. But hopefully some kind soul on both the Twitch and the YouTube streams in the chat will share the link to Skorne on itch.io. But if you go to itch.io and search for Skorne, you'll find it. I recommend grabbing it. If you're unsure, it is pay what you want, so you can just grab it for free. But I would really recommend just getting it. And Sam himself has posted the link in the chat, so thank you for that. So there's, at the back of this book, there was a little mention of a game called Any Planet is Earth, which I spoke about a little bit when I did my when I was talking about Ask the Stars Intergalactic. And that is by Jim Parkin, who's credited down here. And I wanted to do a really, really quick, sneaky look through this, because it's very short. It's even shorter than Skorne, so I knew that I wouldn't be able to do a whole video on this. But I thought I could do a really quick look through Any Planet is Earth, because it does share some DNA with Skorne. I think Skorne would probably like credit its combat system to Any Planet is Earth. I believe this came first. This is a game by Jim Parkin, and it is also available on itch.io, and it is very cheap, and you should go and buy it. I'm not going to do a full read through because it's very dense. But I mean, it's dense in the same way that like Into the Odd is dense, in that it crams a lot onto its pages. But it is like it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spreads, and that's it, and a cover. So this is a sci-fi game. It has a similar kind of thing where you've got this auto damage system where things just cause damage, and you've got a very simple kind of 2d6 resolution. In this case, when you do something risky, you roll 2d6. If you get 7+, you succeed. Sorry, it's 7+ to succeed if you have an advantage. It's 9 or more if you don't. And that's kind of it. It says about how success isn't binary. So if you miss by 1, it might be like a near miss. If you get like a 12, it might be a really high success. But that's left for the GM to like work out. PCs have 4 hits, and a shotgun causes 4 damage basically. So if you get shot by a shotgun, or not even if you get shot at by a shotgun, you're going down basically. So yeah, it's really interesting. I really want to try out one of these systems. It might be either this or Skorne might be the next thing that I kind of take to the table to try and play next, because I'm really fascinated by how they work. In case you haven't put 2 and 2 together, this is very much inspired by Classic Traveller. So you've got a kind of a life path character generation system here, which is like a simplified version of, thank God it's simplified, a simplified version of Traveller's life path thing. You got a very simple kind of system for Welsh. there are Welsh people in. I don't know if there's Welsh representation in this game, but there is wealth. It's so like neat and to the point, because it's just like petty cash is like just your small change, and then anything big that you're dealing with for trading is just assets. So you might have an asset which is a like stock of machinery that you're transporting, or you might have an asset that is a starship itself. So you might have, so like what it's dealing on 2 levels of wealth. You've got like your actual liquid cash and your like big business investments, which is a nice way of doing it. And you start in debt, which is, as always, a fun thing to do. You've got a very simple kind of supply and demand system. You've got a system for building starships, which are very simply sort of handled. And then advancement and goals. I'm just going to read this because I do like this. Personal goals established at character creation afford excellent opportunities for diegetic advancement. You can tick your diegetic box on your bingo card. PCs may want to explore new worlds, master regional commerce, take down a corporation, promote unrest on a world or Stardock, develop or aid charity, raid a jump lane, bring stability to a system, probe deep space, start a business, make good with a demanding patron, or enact vengeance against a nemesis. Nearly anything imaginable can be accomplished with enough planning, dedication, and cost. If anything becomes a driving focus for any PC, treat it as a new personal goal that can have real lasting consequences for completion or failure. I really like this, and I think there's a similar kind of paragraph in Classic Traveller where it basically says, come up with your own objectives and completing them is your reward. And I just love that attitude, and it's something that I've not quite worked out how to properly implement it yet myself, but I feel like it's something that I keep seeing more and more people are interested in this idea of like, you don't have to have leveling and XP and mechanized incentives for your game. You can leave things open and people will come up with their own objectives. Now, it's not that simple. I know that. I know when you get to the table, some players will say, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And that's completely valid, especially if they're new players. They might not feel comfortable doing that. So I think I would love to see more kind of support for generating these. I really like the idea that they will just emerge in gameplay, like in an ideal world. But I think having a few little ways to spark it off would be really good. So that, and then, the referee advice is fantastic. I'm not going to go over the whole thing, but this example of play is brilliant. Gives you everything you need to know, shows it all in context. And then we have a load of like Maze Rat style tables. And that's it. And I'm incredibly flattered that Into the Odd is there right after Classic Traveller, which is ridiculous. I want to do Escape Velocity is an old iOS game, I think, that I heard about through seeing it in the credits. And I've since downloaded a version of it and tried it. And it's like, I wish I had this game when I was growing up because it's a lot of fun. But maybe I'll do a gameplay video of Escape Velocity sometime. So this is Any Planet is Earth by Jim Parkin, and you should go and check it out. But the reason I wanted to show it alongside Skorne is I think they are both representing something that seems to be stirring in kind of a certain corner of like RPG design, and they share a lot, even though they feel very different on the page in many ways. They share a lot of DNA, and there's a lot to be excited about in their development. I'm trying to tap into some of that myself. It feels like the kind of thing where it feels like at the moment there's like early adopters of this style, and I know this is like a style that goes back to Prussia or whatever, but I mean this like revival of the style. It feels like these are it's still in the early adopter phase, and I would love to see more people taking some of the ideas behind this kind of FKR style and really running with it, pushing it to the extremes like these games are doing, and seeing how far you can go in that direction, and giving ways to support that kind of style of play, because I know it's difficult. It sounds so simple when you look at like what FKR means, like it's play worlds, not rules, and you say, oh well, the players just say what they do, and the GM adjudicates it and makes a call and tells them what happens, and maybe they use some dice, maybe they don't, and that's it. It sounds so simple, but I think those games need support, and it's good to see two games here that are really kind of giving that support to people. So yeah, check them out, definitely. And as always, if you've enjoyed this read through, I am looking at doing more RPG read throughs, so let me know if there's stuff you would like to see me do a read through. The best way to get in touch is to go to bastionland.com, where you can go to the Discord server, and you can talk to me there. You can also find a link to the Patreon there, and it's also down here. I can't work out the directions on this thing. You can also go to patreon.com/bastionland if you want to support these streams. And I will be back next week on a different day probably, but I will be back. In the meantime, check out Skorne, check out Any Planet is Earth, and I'll see you next week.